Nairu knocked on the door and entered her father's study, adorned with vibrant Ugandan art and traditional crafts. Her father was sitting in a wooden chair, drinking a local brew called Ajon while watching the live news on the television. The screen displayed the recent capture of the biggest Mafia boss, and he seemed jubilant, knowing he was about to be awarded for this achievement. As a former police chief and now the Prime Minister, he was regarded as a celebrated politician among the people. However, few knew of his cruel and corrupt nature, including Nairu. He shifted his gaze towards her when she called out, "My dear daughter, come here." His smile was wide, showing his delight at seeing her. Why wouldn't he be? Nairu was his only family, and despite his flaws, he loved her dearly. Nairu walked inside and sat on a carved wooden couch adorned with colorful kiting fabric. "Dad, I want to tell you something." He smiled and nodded. "Yes, princess, tell me." Nairu was nervous, but had made up her mind to share her feelings today. "I'm moving from here." His eyebrows knitted together as he gave her a confused look. "Moving?" She nodded. "I'm about to finish my master's degree. And like any grown-up, I want to live independently. Is this house not enough for you?" "I'm not talking about that. I want to live my own life with my own identity, not just as a politician's daughter. I want an independent life, free from the watchful eyes of bodyguards." "You know all this is for your safety," he said, his tone serious. "That's the problem. I don't want it. I just want to live like a normal person without the fear of losing my life. I hope you understand." Mr. Ochan looked at her for a moment before speaking. "Okay, if that's what you want, then it's all right. I'll ask Mr. Sebagala to help you find an apartment if that makes you happy." "That's okay, Dad. I've already found a place for myself. You know, people dream of living a life like yours, and you seem indifferent to it." Nairu got up and smiled. "Good for them, but I don't think I have any interest in living my life like this." He left the room while Nairu gazed at the television, where news anchors reported on the latest developments in the city. "Really? Wow! Don't you think he agreed too easily?" she asked, turning to her friend who was sitting nearby. Her friend Kaitesi sipped on a glass of fresh passion fruit juice. "Yes, and I also know he'll still order his men to keep an eye on you. But I don't mind that. At least now you can live freely without caring about anything. I don't know why you have a problem with living in that big house. It's like a dream home. But it's okay. Not everyone thinks the same, right?" Nairu chuckled. "Okay, now I'm leaving. I have to move into my new apartment tomorrow. I'll come to help you." Nairu stood up and nodded. "Thank you so much. Now I'm leaving. Bye." Her friend smiled and walked Nairu to her car, which was painted in bright colors reminiscent of Ugandan culture. "Good night and drive safely, okay?" Nairu got into the car and began driving through the vibrant streets of Kampala. Suddenly, smoke began to fill the cabin. Confused about what was happening, she looked around but found nothing. She quickly exited the vehicle. She tried calling her friend Kaitesi, but there was no answer. Looking around for help, she noticed the road was eerily silent. Suddenly, she spotted a car approaching and decided to wave her hand for help. "Excuse me," she said, rolling down the window. "Sorry to disturb you, sir, but my car has stopped, and I think there's a problem. If you don't mind, could you please help me?" Before he could respond, Nairu's car exploded with a loud bang, causing her heart to drop and her eyes to widen in shock. The wreckage landed on the road, burning. Before she could process what happened, a man stepped out of the car and approached her. Nairu tried to shout, but he covered her mouth, blindfolded her with a piece of kaitenga fabric, and tied her hands and legs with a strong cord. As she struggled to free herself, he climbed into the driver's seat and drove off. Nairu attempted to escape when someone was tying her to a chair, but she couldn't see who it was due to the blindfold. What do we do next?" "I'm sure her father has already started searching for her," a voice said. He was talking to another person, whom Nairu couldn't identify, but sensed the presence of more than one person. "No need to do anything now. I'll handle it my way. You guys can go." They left while Agaba secured the cloth around Nairu's eyes and made himself comfortable on the couch. Nairu squeezed her eyes shut before opening them and blinking a few times to adjust her vision. Her eyes fell on the man sitting in front of her, taking a long drag from a cigarette. His intense gaze was fixed on Nairu. "Who are you, and why did you bring me here?" He didn't say anything and leaned back, releasing smoke into the air. "Listen, mister, if you want to threaten my father for money, you better stop here because you'll end up in jail once he gets you." He leaned forward, his eyes now bloodshot. "I'm not sure about jail, but your father will be in the grave soon. And the saddest part is, he won't be able to see his one and only beautiful daughter on his deathbed. Who are you and why are you doing this?" He stood up and walked near her. "Your father's crimes and the death of my brother," he said. a grin appearing on his face. Your father really loves you, right? Let me show him how it feels when someone hurts or kills your loved ones without caring that they have a family too. He held up a camera in front of her. Nairu was confused about what he was up to until she felt a sharp pain in her palm. A scream escaped her mouth as Agaba pressed the cigarette against her skin, burning it. What the hell are you doing, you monster? Your dear father will definitely understand the pain now. Tears streamed down Nairu's face as he turned off the camera and threw the cigarette, leaving her groaning in pain. She couldn't even see her hand because it was still tied behind her back. He came in front of her and lowered himself to her level. Your father is the reason for my brother's death. And now you will pay for it along with him. Nairu looked into his eyes, tears falling. I can only expect that from a monster like you. If you think you can take your revenge by hurting me, then do it. Don't worry, I'll be ready to suffer. He left her there and walked away. The whole night passed, and Nairu was still sitting on the chair, tied up. She fell asleep in her place. When Agaba came into the living room in the morning, he saw her sleeping with her head hung low. His jaw clenched as he walked into the kitchen, where he found a pot of leftover matoke and groundnut sauce. He returned with a jug of water and threw it at her face, making her gasp for air. You're not supposed to sleep when I'm already up. Now get up and cook breakfast. Nairu looked at him, incredulous. How merciless can a person become? She understood it today. He untied her ropes and made her stand by grabbing her arm. Are you a complete monster? You'll get your answer soon. I want breakfast cooked in 30 minutes. And if not, get yourself ready for worse. He left, and Nairu started crying as she looked at the burn marks on her palm. What the hell are you still doing? Why can't you find my daughter? Her father shouted, pacing the room adorned with traditional Ugandan art. That unknown monster is torturing my daughter, and I'm sitting here helpless. Our team is doing their best and will find her at any cost. I can't wait. Do whatever you can and just bring my daughter, he yelled, losing control after seeing the video sent from an unknown number. They couldn't even trace the location from the number. Nairu managed to finish cooking, though she burned herself in several places since she had never cooked before. She somehow plated the food, and Agaba looked at her sarcastically. Is this fit for animals? In fact, animals wouldn't eat it. Nairu didn't say anything. Go on, eat it now, he said. She sat down and started eating. Her hands clenched and eyes teared up, but she didn't say anything. Agaba came into his room and hit the wall a few times until his knuckles bled. He sat on the floor, breathing heavily. He was too broken from the death of his brother to see what he was doing, trying to take revenge on his enemy by using Nairu's innocent life. He didn't even know what his father's fault was, but right now he was blinded by rage. He returned to where Nairu was standing, her hands battered and bruised. She was holding back tears, thinking someone had to pay for the wrongdoings of her father. He stood there, watching her silently. He wasn't enjoying it, but he was blinded by revenge and didn't know who he was hurting. Nairu turned around, and her eyes fell on him. He shifted his gaze away, but didn't walk away. I'm sorry for my dad's behavior, Nairu said slowly. He turned his head toward her. I witnessed so many things. I know he is a bad man. He really needs to feel the pain he's unfamiliar with. If he somehow realizes his mistakes and becomes a good person, I wouldn't mind sacrificing my life. Nairu walked away, leaving Agaba to contemplate her disappearing figure. He was sitting on the couch, thinking hard when Nairu approached him with a first aid box, decorated with traditional Ugandan patterns. She extended it toward him, and he raised his head. You'll get an infection in your hand if you don't clean that blood. She placed the box on the table and turned to leave when he stopped her. Stop there. Turn back. He did as he said and looked at her. Here, clean it, he said, extending his hand toward her. Nairu hesitated for a moment, but then took a few steps forward before sitting on the floor. He took her hand in his, and a shiver ran down his body from her soft touch. He realized what he was doing and whom he was hurting. She cleaned his wound and applied medicine while his eyes fell on the cigarette. Burn he gave Nairu. I never did any work in my life because my father didn't let me, Nairu admitted. Agaba was surprised at how calm she was despite the torture she endured. He regretted his decision, although he was still planning to take revenge on the man responsible for his brother's death. He was now battling his thoughts about whether to use Nairu or not. Nairu finished dressing his palm and got up. I don't even know how to cook, so if you really don't want to upset your stomach, please cook by yourself or just give me some time to improve. I'm not going to eat that again. He walked away. During the night, Nairu slept on the cold floor because Agaba denied her the use of any comforts without his permission. Without a blanket, she curled up like a ball, trying to keep warm. Agaba couldn't sleep because thoughts of Nairu wouldn't leave his mind. He entered the living room where she was sleeping, and he realized he was falling for her innocence. It was doing something inside him, and it was the reason he gave up in one day. Carefully, he picked Nairu up and placed her on the couch. He left the first aid box on the table, which she had brought earlier, and started treating her burn marks. His heart weakened as he looked at her. He brushed her hair from her face and realized that a monster's daughter could be this kind and calm. He imagined torturing her to death so that her father would feel the same pain he did. In the end, he still intended to kill him, but now he wasn't going to hurt Nairu. Nairu opened her eyes and found herself in a bed. She quickly sat up, thinking she mistakenly ended up there, only to feel fear take hold when she saw Agaba entering the room. "I'm sorry. I don't know how I got here. I have no idea," she stammered. He placed his fingers on her lips, silencing her. His gaze traveled down to her lips and slowly up to her face. She could smell the sweetness of the local brew on his breath. As he leaned closer, making her hold her breath, he slowly lifted his head and said, "I'll kill your father soon, and as I promised, he will beg to see his beloved daughter, but I won't let him." He left the room as Nairu closed her eyes. The next morning, Nairu entered the kitchen as usual. She didn't really do much housework, but she tried to do as much as possible so he wouldn't hurt her. Now she could see the real human inside him, understanding that he was blinded by anger, but she still couldn't deny the fact that he was going to kill her father. Nairu hated him as a person but loved him like no one else as a father. No matter how cruel he was, he had always been a good, in fact, the best father figure for her. She thought about talking to him, telling him that she was ready to compensate for anything in return for her father's life. She knew that if she sacrificed herself or something happened to him, maybe he would change forever. Finally, Agaba entered the kitchen and saw breakfast already served on the table, including a Ugandan delicacy of posho and fresh fruit. "Cook the food so you won't mess up next time," he said, and Nairu nodded. "I'll keep that in mind. You can taste it if you want. It won't upset your stomach," she offered, a slight smile appearing on her face. After breakfast, Nairu sat down, and Agaba joined her. "Sir, we found out the location where your daughter has been captured, and our team is already on their way," one of the men reported. A sense of hope filled Mr. Oshan's heart. "Let's go! I'll bring my daughter back myself." "But sir..." Mr. Okan didn't let him finish. "She's the only one I have. I'll bring her back myself." They all headed toward their cars and drove off. Agaba came to find Nairu. He realized that from the moment she arrived, he couldn't live without seeing her. The new feeling he was experiencing was something he had never felt before. He had never felt so connected to anyone in his life as he did to Nairu. Nairu was lost in thought, wondering what her father would be doing and how she would save him from Agaba. No matter how bad he was, she still loved her father and didn't want to lose him. Agaba walked behind her and she felt his presence but didn't move. She still believed her father was innocent and didn't deserve to die. "He is the reason for your brother's death, right? Then kill me instead. And it will be equal on both sides because I see no difference between both of you. I'll grieve for him if you kill him because he is my father. But at the same time, I won't be happy to see him working like this, so it's better if you kill me. You'll get what you want, and he'll break completely after my death. And you will be satisfied to see him like that. Why do you think I'm like your father?" There was silence for some time until the special forces arrived. "We need to leave from here," Agaba said, his forehead creased with worry. Nairu saw it as the best time to hold him, hoping the police would finally catch him. But she didn't want to help her father because he wasn't innocent either. She had decided to betray her own father this time. Agaba grabbed Nairu's hand and ran downstairs. Before they could leave, the police were already there, forcing Agaba to take a different route. Throughout the ordeal, he didn't look at Nairu once. She was just praying to God that no one would get hurt. She had made a difficult decision as Agaba drove at full speed. Police cars chasing after them. Agaba thought he lost them, but he was wrong when he saw cars blocking the road ahead. "Stop the car!" he shouted, looking at Nairu. Her eyes were on her father, who was standing with the police and his own bodyguards, clearly planning to kill Agaba. Agaba grabbed Nairu's hand, making her look at him. "Make your decision because after that, you'll lose either me or your father." "I don't care about either of you," she shouted, looking deep into his eyes, forcing him to look away. Agaba's phone started to ring as he got a call from one of his men. They had backup from their special team, and they were already there. The cars coming from behind were not police officers, but his men. "Then I think I have to make the decision myself," he said, starting the engine and turning the car toward the forest. "Don't do this!" Nairu yelled, but he pressed on, speeding through the woods, evading the firing.
Nothing should happen to my daughter,
her father shouted. Suddenly they saw cars in front of them, and they started firing. Mr. Ochan's bodyguards shielded him as they helped him get inside the vehicles. They chased after Agaba's car, along with several police cars, while the rest stayed to confront the other gangsters. Soon, Agaba's car was pursued by the special forces. He knew he was in danger, but he didn't want Nairu to be in any danger, so he tried to get as far away as possible. But it wasn't his lucky day. The car lost control and hit a tree. He opened the door for Nairu, and they both ran into the forest.
They're catching up.
Run, Nairu urged him. Agaba, stop, she said, catching her breath as he looked at her. What happened? I've changed my mind. It's okay. You can use me to threaten my father. I want him to accept his sins in front of everyone, so that people can know his true nature. He stepped closer. Now I won't use you for my revenge, nor am I going to let him go. I'll finish him with my own hands. He turned to run, holding Nairu's hand, but she didn't follow, making him look back at her. Then I'm not going with you. You're no better than him, she said firmly. At that moment, the special forces arrived, facing off against Agaba. Leave my daughter, or else you'll face a worse death than your brother, her father yelled, furious. Agaba tightened his grip on Nairu's hand, refusing to look away, as if waiting for the right moment. You can't do this, Nairu pleaded. Her father frowned in confusion. What are you saying? Nairu, don't worry.
We'll protect you!
I don't want your protection! I want you to admit your crimes and surrender yourself to the police. Agaba looked at Nairu, bewildered. What are you saying? Have you lost your mind? I know he has brainwashed you, but we'll save you. Nairu shook her head. He has done nothing but misuse his power. Mr. Ochan knew what he was doing. He was trying to distract Nairu, so the special team could reach Agaba. They surrounded the forest from all sides, making it difficult for Agaba to escape. One officer tried to shoot Agaba from the side, but Nairu noticed and jumped in front of him. The bullet hit her instead. Agaba's eyes widened as he caught Nairu before she fell. The special forces surrounded him, but he didn't care anymore. He woke up breathing heavily, covered in sweat. Nairu looked around and found herself in her apartment. It was a shock to see herself in bed, realizing that it had all been a dream. She exhaled heavily and drank some water. Grabbing her phone, she saw a notification from Kaitesi inviting her to her house. Sighing, Nairu dropped back onto her bed, closing her eyes. What a horrible dream. Nairu got up after some time, dressed up, and headed to Kaitesi's house. She was halfway there when smoke started to fill her car. Confused, she checked everywhere but found nothing. She quickly exited the vehicle and tried to call Kaitesi, but she wasn't picking up. Looking around for help, Nairu noticed the road was dead silent. Suddenly, a car approached, and she waved her hand for help. Fortunately, it stopped, and Nairu quickly walked over and tapped on the window. I'm sorry to disturb you, sir, but something happened to my car. Could you please help me? As the man slid down the window, Nairu's eyes widened when she recognized his face. Agaba? She called. If you enjoyed this suspenseful story and want to hear more, please make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more thrilling content. Your support means a lot and helps me create more captivating stories for you. Thank you for being part of this journey.